Well, good morning, world. I hope you're all doing fantastic today. This is Josh, and I just woke up this morning. It's about 6:30 a.m. Sitting outside enjoying this brief interlude of awesome summerness. And my subject for this video is going to be, I guess, somewhat related to the expectations that we have of one another and the way that we view the world compared to the way the world actually is. But mostly about people's fear of exposure. And there seems to be a high level of fear of people not just knowing themselves, but people being known by other people. People knowing people's true inner thinkings or inner desires or how a person really feels. And often a person will, say, join a group or be a part of a movement and perhaps have their own view of how certain things should be, but be afraid to speak their mind for fear of ridicule by their fellow man. It's a very common theme. I guess the way that I would see it is that there are two different kinds of isolation from exposure. And there's two different reasons, main reasons. There's fear of being yourself because of how others may perceive you, and the fear that others may not agree with your points of view. But then there's also the fear of exposure from the individual knowing that the point of view that they hold perhaps isn't valid. I guess a good example might be racism. A person may be completely biased against black people, say, someone who grew up in a very white community that went through the racial tension in the 50s and 60s, which never really went away. And then they move to a big city where people don't talk bad about races, let's say. It doesn't mean that there aren't racists or that there's any lesser degree of racism in the city. It just means that in the city it's politically incorrect to talk about these things. So while the person holds this view, they're afraid of exposure because they know that it's wrong to the general community. They may not know that it's wrong in general, period, but their reason for not exposing it is so they don't become ridiculed for their point of view. The other side of it, the first one I mentioned, how, just not being able to see, not being afraid of exposing yourself because of what you believe or what you think. And that's, I think, one of the most difficult for people, because what it shows sometimes is a lack of conviction. And that's not always the case, though. See, a person may not want to speak their mind because they're not quite sure about something, let's say. But on the other hand, a person may want to really share with the world or with friends or family, how they feel, and be so afraid of how they're viewed by others, that they don't want to expose themselves. And I can understand this. This comes with, there's a lot of personal growth that has to take place before a person can reveal themselves and open themselves up without fear. And I've always been the kind of person who speaks my mind. Not always, I don't have the delusion that when I do speak my mind, everything I think is correct. And this is kind of a key point for me, is when you do expose your viewpoint, and you do expose yourself, and you are open to ridicule or to disagreements, it's very important for growth. It kind of actually just popped into my mind a video Lobo uploaded earlier about the little creatures at the bottom of the river who are clinging to the rocks, and one finally lets go. It's that part of the metaphor really applies here to, we're fitting in with the group. We're doing what people do. We we've learned that there are certain things that are considered politically incorrect to talk about. And to me, I think that that's ludicrous, because if there's an issue at hand, let's go back to racism for a minute. Perhaps racism is politically incorrect, racism itself, but it doesn't mean that it's going away. And by ignoring it and pretending it's not there, we're not going to conquer it. We may never conquer it. In fact, I don't see a future where all races intermingle perfectly and everyone gets along and everyone trusts each other equally. Reason being is because that's just not the world we live in. All animals are suspect of other animals, and I hate to compare humans with animals, but the fact is we still have that primitive mind that we may not be able to break away from. And so rather than ignoring the issue at hand, we talk about it. And it's a lot easier when we don't talk about an important issue to assume that other people agree with us. And that's kind of where I'm going with this, is that people who expose themselves get a much wider look at the way that people really think, not the way that we think that people think. So I guess I'm saying bear it all, If you make YouTube videos, don't be afraid to speak your mind and say what you really feel, because you will get feedback that will help you determine whether your points are valid. It doesn't mean that people will agree with you and say, oh yes, you're so right. That's not what we're after. We're after an understanding, a wider understanding of how people really think. I've had some points put out there on some of my videos that I've had, people come and leave a very, very eye-opening comment for me, and it really makes me realize that some of my views are closed at times, and that's another major important part of it. Being aware of yourself and your own shortcomings. And I guess that's where I will tie it up by saying that when you lose your fear of being exposed, when you lose your fear of your shortcomings, when you start to respect yourself for who you are and understand yourself, the ammunition is taken away from other people to make you feel inadequate or to make you feel like your point is not legitimate. But the only way to really know if our points are valid or if they're worthy is to put them out there. So don't be afraid to do it, people. Oh. What a way to end the video. My neighbor is just completely ralphing over there. It's hilarious. 2 houses down. It's a 4th of July today. We're going to this 4th of July party. And my neighbors like to drink. And he's like, comes over the other day, he says, you don't really like to drink, do you? He was bumming a bowl of weed. And I said, no, I really don't. It's just not worth it the next day. And here we are sitting outside at 6:30 in the morning, and I can hear my neighbor 2 houses away going, bleh, bleh. Oh boy, the joys of alcoholism. I am not being judgmental on that point. That's a really good one. I smoke marijuana. It's easy for people to judge someone who smokes pot when they don't understand what it's like to be a stoner. And many stoners are the same way about alcoholics. Talking about, how bad alcohol is and how good cannabis is. These are just little points of view, little points of interest. You can quote health statistics all you want, but the fact is, we're all just people. Addiction's addiction. We're all addicts. We're all imperfect. And that is what makes everything perfect. My favorite quote lately is, everything is just so. And it doesn't seem to be going away. It is going to be a beautiful day today. I love you all. I really do. It sounds cheesy, but I care. I care about people. I care about our future in the world. And I do my best to vocalize my views because I love to listen to other people's views. And not being afraid to expose my ideas is really what keeps me sane. It allows me to be called out on ideas that I have that might not be valid. So, peace and love to everybody, and I hope you all have a great day.